The crash landing the forbidden planet Zara pressed herself against the crystalline bark of the towering trees, her violet eyes fixed on the smoking wreckage that had torn through her world's pristine canopy. The metallic screech of twisted metal still echoed through the emerald forests of Vethra Prime, a sound so alien and harsh that even the native creatures had fallen silent. Her people, the Vetherae, had strict laws about sky-fallen objects. Nothing good ever came from the stars above. The elders spoke in hushed whispers of the star demons who brought fire and death wherever they landed. Zara's grandmother had told her stories of worlds consumed by beings from distant suns, planets stripped bare and left as hollow shells. Something drew her forward through the mist-laden undergrowth. The human ship lay broken like a wounded animal among the violet ferns. Steam rose from its hull, creating ghostly shapes in the humid air. Zara had never seen a human before, but she knew the legends. They were supposed to be monsters with pale skin and violent hearts, creatures who destroyed everything they touched. The hatch finally hissed open. Her breath caught in her throat. The figure that emerged was nothing like the demons from her nightmares. He was tall but moved with careful grace, his dark hair matted with blood from a cut on his forehead. His clothes were torn, revealing skin marked with bruises and burns. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They weren't the cold, predatory gaze she expected. They were warm brown and filled with something she recognized despite herself. Gentleness. The human surveyed his surroundings with quiet respect rather than conquest. When a small creature scurried past, he stepped aside to avoid disturbing it. When a flower caught his attention, he bent to examine it without plucking it from its stem. The first encounter days passed as Zara watched from the shadows. The human had made a small camp near a crystal stream, using salvaged materials from his ship. She expected him to cut down trees for shelter, to kill animals for food, to pollute the water with his presence. Instead, he gathered fallen branches, collected only fruits that had already dropped, and carefully filtered water through cloth before drinking. His name was David. She learned from listening to him, talked to himself as he worked. He spoke to the plants as he moved around them, apologizing when he had to disturb a root or branch. He thanked the stream for its water and the fallen wood for its warmth. On the seventh day, something happened that changed everything. Zara was crouched behind a cluster of glowing mushrooms when the ground began to tremble. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the forest, causing her blood to freeze. Every Vethri child knew that sound. The Shadow Maw had awakened. The creature that emerged from the deeper woods was nightmare-made flesh, 3 times taller than any. Vethri, covered in midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light itself. The Shadow Maw was the apex predator of Vethra Prime. Its 6 legs ended in claws that could slice through stone, and its 3 heads each bore rows of crystal-sharp teeth. Yellow eyes burned like small suns as it fixed its gaze on the human camp. David stood slowly, making no sudden movements. He didn't reach for a weapon or try to run. Instead, he raised his hand's palm forward and spoke in a low, soothing voice. "Easy. Bear, beautiful. I'm not here to hurt anyone." The Shadow Maw circled him, all 3 heads weaving hypnotically. Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. She should run, should get help, should do anything except watch this strange human face certain. Death with such calm acceptance. But then something impossible happened. A smaller shape bounded out from behind the great beast, a Shadow Maw cub, no larger than Zara herself, with scales that shimmered between black and silver. And David smiled. The impossible bond. The moment everything changed, the young Shadow Maw approached. David with the fearless curiosity that only the very young possess. Its scales rippled with colors Zara had never seen before, hints of deep purple and gold that caught the filtered sunlight. The cub sniffed at David's outstretched hand, then did something that made Zara's world tilt on its axis. It purred. The sound was like distant thunder, but gentle, almost musical. The massive mother watched every movement, her 3 heads tracking between her offspring and the strange bipedal creature that should have been prey. David remained perfectly still, letting the cub investigate him at its own pace. "That's it." "Little one," David whispered, "I'm just a visitor here. Just passing through your beautiful home." The cub rubbed against his leg, much like the domestic creatures Zara's people kept as companions. David slowly, carefully, reached down to touch the creature's head. His fingers traced along the ridge of developing scales, and the cub's purr grew louder. Zara watched in stunned silence as the galaxy's most feared predator allowed a human to pet its child. The mother Shadowmaw settled onto her belly, never taking her eyes off David, but no longer radiating the killing intent that had filled the clearing moments before. The cub climbed into David's lap, curling up like an enormous, deadly house pet. Understanding grows over the following days. Zara found herself returning again and again to watch the impossible friendship unfold. David had somehow been adopted by the Shadowmaw family. The mother would bring fresh kills and share them with him, teaching him which parts were safe for his alien biology. The cub followed him everywhere, playfully pouncing on his shadow and bringing him interesting rocks and flowers. David talked to them constantly, his voice a steady stream of gentle observation and quiet affection. He named the mother Stella for the star-like pattern on her largest head, and the cub became Nova for the way its scales shifted like stellar explosions. "You're probably wondering why I'm not afraid," David said one day, seemingly to the air. Zara pressed herself deeper into the shadows, realizing he might have known she was there all along. "The truth is, fear makes you do stupid things. It makes you strike first, think later. But respect, respect makes you listen." He scratched behind Nova's developing ear spines, earning another rumbling purr. "Every creature has a language. You just have to be patient enough to learn it." The test of trust on the 10th day. David's ship finally powered back online. The hum of awakening engines filled the forest, and Zara saw Stella's head snap toward the sound. The great beast rose to her full height, suddenly tense. David noticed immediately. He placed the calming hand on Nova's back and spoke softly to Stella. "It's just my way home, beautiful. I'm not bringing anyone else here. This place is too precious to share with those who wouldn't understand." But Stella remained agitated. She began pacing, her claws leaving deep gouges in the earth. Nova whimpered, sensing his mother's distress. That's when David did something that took Zara's breath away. He walked to his ship, powered it down, and began dismantling the communication array. Piece by piece, he destroyed his only means of calling for rescue. "There," he said, returning to Stella's side. "No one else will find this place. Your secret is safe." The great predator studied him for a long moment, then slowly lowered her heads. She touched her snout to his chest, over his heart, and for just an instant, Zara thought she saw tears in the human's eyes. A new understanding that night, as David sat by his small fire with Nova curled against his side and Stella standing guard. Zara made a decision that would change her life forever. She stepped out of the shadows. David looked up without surprise, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. His eyes held no threat, only gentle curiosity and infinite patience. "Hello," he said simply. "I'm David. Would you like to sit by the fire?" Zara hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to run. But Nova lifted his head and chirped softly, and somehow that small sound made all the difference. If the Shadowmaw could trust this human, perhaps she could too. She sat at the edge of the firelight, as far from David as possible, while still feeling its warmth. He didn't try to come closer or make conversation. He simply accepted her presence, the same way he'd accepted the Shadow Maws, with respect and patience. As the alien constellations wheeled overhead, Zara realized she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. Not conquest or domination, but genuine friendship between species that should have been enemies. Building bridges, the language of trust. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt ancient and natural. Each morning, Zara would find David sitting by the stream, sharing breakfast with his unlikely family. Nova had grown visibly in that short time, his scales darkening and his coordination improving. Stella remained watchful but relaxed, occasionally bringing David interesting objects she'd found in the deep forest. Zara gradually moved closer to their circle. First, she accepted David's offer of fruit. Then she began staying for entire meals. David never pushed, never asked questions about her people or her world. He simply existed in her space with the same gentle respect he showed everything else. "Your world is beautiful," he told her one morning as they watched Nova chase phosphorescent butterflies through the mist. "I've traveled to hundreds of planets, but I've never seen anything like this." Zara found her voice for the first time in days. "The elders say visitors from the sky only bring destruction." David nodded thoughtfully. "They're not wrong. Most of my species would see this place as a resource to be exploited. They'd want to capture Nova, study Stella, turn this paradise into profit." He looked at her directly. "But not all of us are the same. Just like not all Shadow Maws are mindless killers. Not all humans are destroyers." Sharing stories as trust grew, so did communication. Zara learned about David's past, how he'd been a xenobiologist on a research vessel, studying alien life forms. He'd grown disgusted with his crew's methods, the way they treated sentient beings as specimens rather than individuals. "I requested transfer to a solo research mission," he explained, while Nova dozed in a patch of sunlight. "I wanted to study life, not exploit it. The crash was, well, maybe not an accident. Maybe the universe knew I needed to be here." Zara shared stories of her own people, their deep connection to the forest, their fear of the unknown. She spoke of her grandmother's tales, of planets stripped bare by sky demons, of the ancient pact her people had made to remain hidden from the stars. "Hiding isn't always cowardice," David said gently. "Sometimes it's wisdom. Your people have preserved something precious here." The revelation one evening, as they sat around the fire with Stella and Nova, Zara made a confession that surprised even herself. "I've been reporting to my people," she said quietly. "Every day I tell them what I've learned." David's expression didn't change. "What do you tell them?" "The truth. That you're not like the stories. That you've brought no harm to our world. That you've chosen to stay and protect it rather than exploit it." She paused, then added, "Some believe me. Others think you've somehow enchanted me." David smiled sadly. "And what do you think?" Zara looked at Nova, who had grown comfortable enough to sleep with his head in her lap. She looked at Stella, who now brought her gifts of pretty stones and unusual flowers. She looked at David, whose presence had brought not chaos, but peace to this corner of the forest. "I think," she said slowly, "that some humans might be capable of something we never expected." "What's that?" "Love without possession. Wonder without destruction. Strength without dominance." The choice the next morning brought visitors. Zara heard them before she saw them, the careful footsteps of Vetheri scouts moving through the forest. Her heart raced as she recognized her. Brother Kale's voice calling her name. David stood calmly as 5 Vitheri warriors emerged from the undergrowth, weapons drawn. They stopped short when they saw Stella, who had risen to her full height at the first sign of strangers. "Zara, get away from the sky demon," Kale commanded. "We've come to rescue you." But Zara didn't move. Instead, she stepped closer to David, placing herself between him and her people's weapons. "He's not a demon," she said firmly. "His name is David, and he's my friend." The warriors exchanged uncertain glances. Their weapons were designed for hunting forest creatures, not for facing down a fully grown Shadowmaw. Stella's 3 heads weaved menacingly, but she made no move to attack. David raised his hands peacefully. "I have no quarrel with your people," he said. "I've been a guest in your world, nothing more." Nova, confused by the tension, bounded over to greet the newcomers with friendly chirps. The warriors backed away in terror as the young Shadowmaw tried to nuzzle their hands. "It's friendly?" Kale whispered in disbelief. "Nova was orphaned when I arrived," David lied smoothly, protecting Stella's secret. "I've been caring for him. Stella here is his adoptive mother. They've been protecting me as much as I've been protecting them." It was a half-truth at best, but it served its purpose. The warriors lowered their weapons slightly, though they remained ready to strike. "The moment of truth, Zara," Kale said urgently. "You have to come home. The elders are gathering to decide what to do about this situation." Zara looked at David, then at Nova and Stella, then back at her brother. The choice before her wasn't just about taking sides in a conflict. It was about choosing between 2 different visions of what the future could hold. She could return to her people and let them decide David's fate. Or she could stand here, in this moment, and defend the impossible friendship that had grown in. The shadow on a crashed ship. "And they'll have to make their decision with all the facts," she said finally. "David, will you come with me? Will you speak to my people?" Every Vetheri warrior stiffened. Bringing a human to their hidden city was unthinkable. David looked at Stella and Nova, then at Zara. "If you believe it's right, then yes, but they come with me. We're family now." The words hung in the air like a challenge and a promise. A human claiming kinship with the galaxy's most feared predators. A Vetheri woman willing to risk everything for an impossible friendship. And somehow, standing there in the golden light, filtering through the crystal trees, it felt like the beginning of something that could change the galaxy forever. The trial of hearts. The journey to truth. The procession through the forest was unlike anything the Vetheri had ever seen. David walked calmly between the nervous warriors, while Nova bounded playfully around the group, and Stella glided silently through the undergrowth like a living shadow. Zara stayed close to David, her presence the only thing preventing the warriors from bolting in terror. Kale kept glancing back at the impossible sight. "Sister, what have you done?" he whispered during a rest stop. "I've learned the difference between legend and truth," Zara replied. "The question is whether our people are wise enough to do the same." The hidden city of the Vetheri was carved into the roots of the great tree, a massive organism that had grown for millennia at the heart of their territory. Its phosphorescent bark provided light, its vast canopy offered protection, and its root system created natural chambers where her people had built their civilization. As they approached the city's outer perimeter, more warriors emerged from concealed positions. Word of their arrival spread like wildfire through the root halls and branchways. By the time they reached the council chamber, hundreds of Vetheri had gathered to witness the unprecedented sight. Facing the council of elders sat in a circle beneath the tree's heartwood, their ancient faces carved with lines of wisdom and worry. Elder Nyx, the eldest among them, spoke first. "Zara, daughter of Thren, you have broken the most sacred law of our people. You have consorted with the sky demon and brought it into our sacred city." "I have brought a friend," Zara replied steadily. "And he has brought proof that not all who fall from the sky come as enemies." Nova chose that moment to trot forward and sniff curiously at Elder Nyx's robes. The ancient Vetheri froze as the young Shadowmaw brushed against her leg, purring softly. "Impossible," breathed Elder Corwin. The Shadow Maw serves no one. They don't serve me, David said quietly. We're partners, family. I care for them, and they protect me. It's the oldest relationship in the universe. Friendship based on mutual respect. Elder Nix studied David with eyes that had seen centuries pass. You speak our language well for a sky demon. Zara taught me. Just as she taught me about your people's wisdom. You've preserved something precious here. A world where different species can coexist in harmony. I didn't come to destroy that. I came to learn from it. The challenge Elder Voss, known for his distrust of outsiders, stood abruptly. Pretty words mean nothing. If you truly respect our ways, prove it. Face the trial of hearts. A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. The trial of hearts was an ancient ritual, reserved for those who sought to join the Vethri people through marriage or adoption. It required the candidate to demonstrate not just courage, but genuine understanding of Vethri values. Voss, Elder. Nix warned, the trial has never been given to an outsider. Then let this be the test of whether he's truly different from other sky demons, Voss replied. If he fails, we'll know his words are lies. If he succeeds, double quotes, he shrugged. Perhaps the old prophecy spoke truth. David looked at Zara, who nodded encouragingly. What does the trial involve? 3 challenges, Elder Nix explained reluctantly. The challenge of understanding, where you must demonstrate knowledge of our ways. The challenge of sacrifice, where you must give up something precious for the good of others. And the challenge of trust, where you must place your life in the your life. Hands of another. The first challenge, the challenge of understanding, took place in the Memory Grove, where the history of the Vethri was recorded in living crystal formations. David had to navigate the grove and answer questions about Vethri culture, biology, and philosophy. To everyone's surprise, he moved through the crystals with reverent care, pausing to study each formation before answering. His responses showed not just academic knowledge, but genuine appreciation for Vethri values. Your people understand something that many advanced civilizations have forgotten, he said when asked about Vethri philosophy. That true strength comes not from dominating nature, but from finding your place within it. You've built a society that enhances the natural world rather than replacing it. The second challenge, the challenge of sacrifice, was more personal. David was required to give up his most precious possession for the benefit of the community. Without hesitation, he retrieved a small device from his ship, his personal log, containing decades of research and memories. This contains everything I've learned in my travels, he said, placing it before the elders. All my research, my discoveries, my personal memories. I offer it freely, hoping it might help your people understand that not all star-born knowledge comes with strings attached. Elder Nix examined the device with growing amazement. This is invaluable. Scientific data from hundreds of worlds. And it's yours, David said simply. No conditions, no expectations. A gift from one seeker of knowledge to others. The final challenge, the challenge of trust, was the most dangerous. David had to enter the deep roots, the darkest part of the underground city, alone and unarmed. There he would face whatever the spirits of the tree deemed appropriate, and his survival would depend entirely on trusting the Vethri to guide him. What the elders didn't tell him was that Stella and Nova would not be allowed to accompany him. This was a test of whether David trusted the Vethri people themselves, not just his Shadow Maw family. As David prepared to enter the deep roots, Nova whimpered and tried to follow. David knelt and gently held the young creature's head in his hands. I have to do this alone, buddy, but I'll be back. I promise. Stella approached, and to everyone's astonishment, she nuzzled David's shoulder in what could only be interpreted as a gesture of support and affection. David disappeared into the darkness of the deep roots, leaving his fate in the hands of people who had been taught to fear his kind for generations. In that moment, Zara realized that the trial wasn't just testing David. It was testing all of them, their capacity to grow beyond fear, to embrace the zindu possibility of change, and to trust in the power of understanding over prejudice. The wait for David's return would determine not just his fate, but the future of two species learning to see past ancient fears to find common ground. The new dawn in the heart of darkness. The deep roots were older than memory, a maze of tunnels carved by the great tree's ancient growth. Here, in absolute darkness, David felt his way forward with careful steps. The air was thick with the scent of rich earth and growing things, but also with something else, a presence that seemed to watch and evaluate. Hours passed as he navigated the winding passages, guided only by the faint warmth that seemed to emanate from certain directions. His scientist's mind cataloged the experience, but his heart simply trusted. The Vathari had never led him wrong. Zara had shown him nothing but kindness. If this was where the trial led, then this was where he needed to be. Finally, he emerged into a vast underground chamber lit by bioluminescent formations. At its center grew a smaller version of the great tree, its roots intertwined with crystalline structures that pulsed with soft light. And there, waiting for him, was Elder Nyx. "You came alone," she observed. "I gave my word," David replied. "And I trust your people." The ancient Vathari nodded slowly. "This is the heart chamber, where the great tree first took root millennia ago. Here we commune with the wisdom of ages past." She gestured to the crystal formations. "Place your hand upon the heartstone and let the tree judge your intentions." The judgment of the tree, David, approached the central crystal, a formation that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. As his palm touched its surface, the chamber exploded with light and sensation. Images flooded his mind, the history of the Vathari, their struggles and triumphs, their deep connection to the living world around them. But the tree didn't just show him their past. It shared their fears. He experienced their terror as ships fell from the sky, their anguish as other worlds were stripped of life, their desperate choice to hide rather than face extinction. And then, impossibly, the tree began to share his own memories, his childhood wonder at discovering life on distant worlds, his growing horror at how his own species treated other forms of consciousness, his decision to leave everything behind in search of a better way. The connection deepened, and David realized he wasn't just being judged. He was being understood, the same way he had worked to understand Nova and Stella, the same way he had learned to understand Zara and her people. When the light faded, Elder Nyx was watching him with tears in her ancient eyes. "The tree has spoken," she whispered. "You are no sky demon. You are something new." The returned David emerged from the deep roots to find the entire city waiting. Stella bounded forward with a joyful roar, while Nova practically tackled him with enthusiastic affection. Zara's face showed relief and something deeper, pride in her friend, who had faced the unknown with courage and trust. Elder Nyx addressed the gathered crowd. "The trial of hearts is complete. The tree itself has judged this human worthy of our trust. He seeks not to conquer but to coexist, not to take but to give, not to rule but to learn." She turned to David. "If you choose to stay among us, you will be the first Skyborn to call Vithra Prime home. But know that this path is not without cost. Your own people will not understand. They may even see you as a traitor." David looked around at the faces. Surrounding him, Vathari, who had moved from fear to acceptance, at Stella and Nova, who had become his family, at Zara, whose friendship had changed everything. "My own people stopped being my home the day they chose destruction over understanding," he said. "If you'll have me, I'd like to help build something better here." Building bridges in the weeks that followed, David proved his worth in ways that surprised everyone. His knowledge of galactic technology helped the V3 improve their hidden defenses. His understanding of other species allowed them to establish peaceful contact with previously unknown neighbors. His partnership with the Shadow Maws led to breakthroughs in interspecies communication that revolutionized their entire society. But, perhaps most importantly, he served as living proof that different species could find common ground. Zara became his primary collaborator, helping translate not just languages, but entire ways of thinking. Together, they developed new models for peaceful first contact, wrote protocols for protecting developing civilizations, and established the foundations for what would eventually become the Galactic Harmony Initiative. "You've started something that will outlive us both," Zara told him one evening as they watched Nova and a group of young Veithari play together under the great tree's canopy. "We started it," David corrected. "You took the first risk by choosing to trust me." Everything else followed from that moment of courage. The ripple effect word of the human, who lived peacefully among the Veithari, began to spread through the galaxy's underground networks, traders, explorers, and refugees who operated outside the mainstream channels. Some came seeking the legendary planet where predators and prey lived in harmony. Most left disappointed when they couldn't find it, but a few, a precious few, arrived with genuine intentions. They came seeking not exploitation, but understanding, not conquest, but cooperation. Each was tested as David had been tested, judged not by their species, but by their character. The hidden sanctuary began to grow into something unprecedented, a multi-species community built on principles of mutual respect and shared wisdom. "I gave my word," David replied, "and I trust your people." The ancient Veithari nodded slowly. "This is the heart chamber, where the great tree first took root millennia ago. Here we commune with the wisdom of ages past." She gestured to the crystal formations. "Place your hand upon the heartstone and let the tree judge your intentions." The judgment of the tree, David approached the central crystal, a formation that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. As his palm touched its surface, the chamber exploded with light and sensation. Images flooded his mind, the history of the Veithari, their struggles and triumphs, their deep connection to the living world around them. But the tree didn't just show him their past. It shared their fears. He experienced their terror as ships fell from the sky, their anguish as other worlds were stripped of life, their desperate choice to hide rather than face extinction. And then, impossibly, the tree began to share his own memories, his childhood wonder at discovering life on distant worlds, his growing horror at how his own species treated other forms of consciousness, his decision to leave everything behind in search of a better way. The connection deepened, and David realized he wasn't just being judged. He was being understood, the same way he had worked to understand Nova and Stella, the same way he had learned to understand Zara and her people. When the light faded, Elder Nyx was watching him with tears in her ancient eyes. "The tree has spoken," she whispered. "You are no sky demon. You are something new." The returned David emerged from the deep roots to find the entire city waiting. Stella bounded forward with a joyful roar, while Nova practically tackled him with enthusiastic affection. Zara's face showed relief and something deeper, pride in her friend who had faced the unknown with courage and trust. Elder Nyx addressed the gathered crowd. "The trial of hearts is complete. The tree itself has judged this human worthy of our trust. He seeks not to conquer but to coexist, not to take but to give, not to rule but to learn." She turned to David. "If you choose to stay among us, you will be the first skyborn to call Vethra Prime home. But know that this path is not without cost. Your own people will not understand. They may even see you as a traitor." David looked around at the faces surrounding him. Veithari, who had moved from fear to acceptance, at Stella and Nova, who had become his family, at Zara, whose friendship had changed everything. My own people stopped being my home the day they chose destruction over understanding, he said. If you'll have me, I'd like to help build something better here. Building bridges in the weeks that followed, David proved his worth in ways that surprised everyone. His knowledge of galactic technology helped the Vetheri improve their hidden defenses. His understanding of other species allowed them to establish peaceful contact with previously unknown neighbors. His partnership with the Shadow Maws led to breakthroughs in interspecies communication that revolutionized their entire society. But perhaps most importantly, he served as living proof that different species could find common ground. Zara became his primary collaborator, helping translate not just languages, but entire ways of thinking. Together, they developed new models for peaceful first contact, wrote protocols for protecting developing civilizations, and established the foundations for what would eventually become the Galactic Harmony Initiative. You've started something that will outlive us both, Zara told him one evening as they watched Nova and a group of young Vetheri play together under the great tree's canopy. We started it, David corrected. You took the first risk by choosing to trust me. Everything else followed from that moment of courage. The ripple effect word of the human, who lived peacefully among the Vetheri, began to spread through the galaxy's underground networks. Traders, explorers, and refugees who operated outside the mainstream channels. Some came seeking the legendary planet where predators and prey lived in harmony. Most left disappointed when they couldn't find it. But a few, a precious few, arrived with genuine intentions. They came seeking not exploitation but understanding, not conquest but cooperation. Each was tested as David had been tested, judged not by their species but by their character. The hidden sanctuary began to grow into something unprecedented, a multi-species community built on principles of mutual respect and shared wisdom. The legacy years later, when galactic historians looked back on the period they would call the Great Awakening, they would trace its origins to a single moment, the crash of a research vessel on an unmapped world, and the friendship that grew from that unlikely beginning. But in the quiet moments, when David sat with Stella and her now adult offspring, when he shared meals with Zara's extended family, when he watched young Vetheri learning alongside human refugees and other galactic outcasts, he knew the real truth. The legacy wasn't in the grand historical movements or the diplomatic breakthroughs. It was in the simple revolutionary act of seeing past fear to find friendship. It was in choosing trust over suspicion, understanding over ignorance, love over hate. As the alien constellations wheeled overhead, painting the great tree's canopy with silver light, David reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had crashed on this world as a lost exile. He would live out his days as something far more precious, a bridge between worlds, a testament to the possibility of peace, and living proof that sometimes the most feared beasts in the galaxy are the loneliness in our own hearts. And in the forest depths, where ancient legends whispered of sky demons and impossible friendships, new stories were being born. Stories of hope, of courage, and of the infinite possibilities that open when different. Species choose to see each other not as enemies, but as family. A galaxy would never be the same.